There's a book by George Kuchavitsky called A Scientific Approach to Playing the Piano. I read that in 1980. It totally turned me around, and since then I never stopped my research on the brain and how the nervous system and how music works. That was the first book I read about it. It totally radicalized me, and I realized I had no idea what I was doing in my teaching. I was not really being effective. And basically, in between the words, what he said is, this is not the instrument. It's an illusion. You're the instrument. Everything you're working on is internal to you. In other words, this is a process-oriented event. All right? It's not an information event. The information comes in the study of the music, but in the performance of it, it's all internal processes. And what you're doing is in training internal processes. The tools you use with which to play are your mind, your body, and your emotions. You all know they are trainable. Your body certainly is trainable, and your mind certainly is trainable. And you certainly can control your emotions. It's done all the time. But you have to do that to an incredibly high degree. Those are what you're using when you play. Now, Kuchavitsky, the result of Kuchavitsky's book, one of the results was he proved scientifically, in the bibliography in the book is in 3 different languages. It's an incredible piece of writing. You can also get that from our website, galper.com. He basically proved all music is played by ear. All music. If you can't hear it, you can't play it. Period. So now you have the answer to all your problems. You couldn't play something because you couldn't hear it. And what he said was, and I mentioned it earlier, if the signal from the brain is strong enough, the hands or whatever will do anything to respond. And it's all about creating a strong brain signal. Okay, when I read that, I said, this is great, and I started rethinking my approach to teaching. A year later, I'm on the road with Phil Woods' band, and we're in a motel. It's 6 in the morning. We're checking out to take an 8-hour ungodly ride to the next gig in the van. And the Mr. Rogers show was on. Everybody familiar with Mr. Rogers? When he has guests. So I had my suitcase packed, I had my shoulder bag on. The door was half open. I was about to leave the room, and he had the classical pianist Andre Watts as a guest. So I hear Mr. Rogers says, "Well, Andre, how do you play music?" I said, "Wow, that is a hell of a question." So I stopped, and Andre says, "It all depends on the intensity of your concentration and the vividness of your oral, A-U-R-A-L, oral imagination." So, question, how many think you have trouble playing what you hear? Well, you're all wrong. You are all playing exactly the way you hear. That's what he proved. So, I saw this again. And when Andre Watts said that, I was like, oh man, he said the same thing Kuchavitsky said in different terms. Then many years later, I was watching just happened to see it by clicking through the channels, a little excerpt of Dizzy backstage after a high school concert with these kids all around him asking questions. And the kids said, "Mr. Gillespie, what's going on in your head when you play?" What's the best question of all? I used to ask that of myself. He said, "Well, most people think it's ba-doo 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 bop." He says, "But it's not. It's really ba-doo 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 bop." So, you play exactly the way you hear. Kuchavitsky proved it. So if you're hearing ba-doo ba-da ba-doo ba-da bop, that's the way you're going to play. What he's saying is your oral imagination, your hearing, is not vivid enough, alive enough in your ears for you to play it. When the signal from the brain gets strong enough, you can play it. That's what you're doing, developing a strong brain signal. So what you're saying is you hear weak or pale, if you will. And you've got to hear loud like this. When I'm playing, I'm not saying I think I'll play this, and then I think I'll play this, and I think I'll play that. It's going by too fast. That's an intellectual approach. What's going on is actually the choice is out of my hands. It's going by too fast to consciously choose it. I'm choosing it on an intuitive level. And the intuition, the decision-making process at the intuitive level functions 20,000 times faster than the intellectual process. How many of you worked on a lick and then tried to throw it in your solo? And what happens? What happens? It messes it up. Because you're thinking. It doesn't take intelligence to be a jazz musician. There's plenty of proof of that around. You know, as a matter of fact, intelligent people have a terrible problem shutting down their brain and letting their intuition function. So I am making decisions, but in a sense, they feel like they're out of my hand, because when I'm playing, I'm being compelled to play something. You don't play something because you decided to play it. There's only one reason to play something: because you had to. Because it was so intense in your internal hearing that you could do nothing but respond to the signal. You understand what I'm saying? So what you're saying is your brain signals are weak, and you're going to have to get them stronger. Now, I know this. I remember what it was like hearing at your level. And I always used to think, is this the way it's going to be? Because it sucks, you know. Well, no, because your hearing grows automatically, whether you like it or not. You're not going to be hearing the same way tomorrow you hear today. You're always going to be growing. There are certain ways to develop vivid hearing. Do we have a piano player who would like to be a sucker for me? Please come to the piano. You're a piano player. Yeah. Okay. Is there a lick you've been working on? You practice licks?
Not really. I haven't been
Uh-oh. How many practice licks? Not enough. Oh, so I don't want to hear any complaints about you don't know any vocabulary. That's something you've been working on? Short phrase. 2 bars, a bar.
A short phrase?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can play a 2/5 kind of lick.
Okay, cool, perfect. Okay, here's what I want you to do. Because the process is crucial, all right? I want you to close your eyes. Put your hands on the keyboard where you're going to start, because we don't want to have a lot of time between my explanation, my instructions, and the execution. Close your eyes. In your head, scream as loud as possible the line. Then, when you're done with it, open your eyes and toss it off. Unfortunately, that's the hardest part. We don't want you to try. What you're doing is programming your ears. This always works. You're always programming your hearing. Then you've got to let your hearing do the job, not your intellect. So don't think about it. Don't try. Just do it. Okay? Close your eyes. Scream it. When you're done, open your eyes and try to just toss it off. You notice the different way she played it? Yeah. You notice the way you played it?
Yeah.
Thank you. I rest my case. Because you were screaming and loud in your head. It was vivid in your it was vivid in your imagination. You can come back now. You've done your job. You dig it?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like pre-rehearsing an idea before you play it, and you keep pre-rehearsing it until eventually you start hearing loud. I mean, when I'm playing, the sound of it is so loud in my head, it just takes me over. All I'm hearing is colors. That's all it is. And I'm responding to it. So your hearing always improves, as long as you're working on it. You're not going to hear 10 years from now the way you're hearing now, guaranteed.